Okay, it's 6:02. I think we will start now.
Sounds good.
My name is Brian Kasbar. I will be the moderator here. Nicholas, if you'd like to move to the next screen. Levine, the Executive Director, Autism Society of Southeast Wisconsin, will be a panelist, as well as Gina Herren-Pope, who is the Chief Content Officer at Gemiini. She's a master teacher with 14 years of experience in the classroom and 2 teen children herself on the spectrum. Just so everybody knows, this is being recorded and it will be shared on Facebook and in other public forums. So if you ask a question and you don't want any identifying information to be put into a public forum, please just keep that in mind. If you would like to ask a question at any time, we'd like this to be conversational. You can,
Absolutely.
yeah, hover your cursor down at the bottom and you'll see Q&A and chat, and in either one, if you put a comment in, we'll respond to it. And we find that these seminars go very well when participants ask questions. So with that, I will give it to Gina and step aside.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brian. Hi, everybody. Nicholas, if you'll go ahead and go to our first slide, please. Thank you. So a lot of parents have been very concerned recently about emotional or social, I don't want to say necessarily that kids are regressing, but they're very concerned about keeping them moving forward in those 2 areas of development during this pandemic. And I loved this picture because it kind of summarized to me a little bit about what we're going to be talking about tonight, which is, nothing is done in isolation. Okay, they may not be able right now to be hanging out with friends, or your families might not be coming over even to have dinners. Maybe a favorite cousin can't come over to even do little play dates. So by looking at this, I'm hoping to reassure you that we can actually work on other areas that will affect that emotional and that social area that they get from being in a classroom, having those routines, being with their peers, that we can maybe try to continue their confidence, their sense of well-being, all of that, because all of the elements you see here, the physical, the emotional, their cognitive, and their social, they all work together to create a happy, healthy child. Now, social awareness is defined as the ability to show understanding and empathy to others. Now, this is difficult to teach directly, right? This is difficult. When I see something like this, I feel hope. So, in looking at this particular slide, I thought of a student I used to work with. I worked with him for actually 4 years when I was doing in-home therapy at the time for ABA. And I worked with him from the ages of 7 to 11. And his physical domain was always his greatest strength. He could, ride a bike, rollerblade. He liked to play red light, green light, Red Rover with his brothers and sisters, those kinds of things. And that was honestly his only real, strength, where I would say he was probably very typical to his peers. Everything else, there was deficits, very clearly an ASD. Now, I don't know if this has anything to do, but his father did happen to play for the NFL. Brian, as a professional sports player there yourself, I'm sure you understand that might trickle down to your kids a little bit. And so what's interesting is through the physical, he had confidence, just that one area. So when he started middle school, he started wrestling. Never wrestled until middle school. And I'm happy to say today he's an adult. He's actually in his early 20s. And he went out for the Olympic team this last trial. He's a professional wrestler right now. So what it did is it bled over into other areas. Pretty soon you saw him becoming more social because he's part of a team. You saw that cognitive development because he had to think about offensive, and defensive strategies for wrestling. And then you had that emotional component because he gained that confidence. He was really good at something. He excelled. He had awards in high school. He went to college on scholarship. The kid was absolutely amazing in that. But that one domain can bleed over. I only share this story with the hope that you see this clear picture of how nothing is in a vacuum. Everything kind of works together. if nothing else, just know as we move through tonight, if there's one little area that we discuss, you can go, oh, you know what, I can work on that. You're going to be working on the whole child. It's what in education we call the whole child approach. And so I just want all you parents out there to know that these are difficult times. And we're going to do our best tonight to give you maybe a few things you can work on to help strengthen those social and emotional elements. Okay, if no questions so far, then we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. Are you on slide 2, Nicholas? I'm sorry, I can't find you guys again. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you. So social and emotional learning, we call it SEL in education, really works on 5 different areas. So we have self-management, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and the social awareness. These sound like very big words, and some of you may have small children, but actually all of these things can be worked on as, from infancy, really. Self-regulation to from early child all the way to being able to self-manage Fortune 500 company, if you will. So all of these elements, they sound really big, but they can actually start off very, very small. I was reading some articles recently that were actually published from Yale, the Center of Emotional Intelligence, YCEI. And during this pandemic, many teachers and professors out of Yale, they were saying that during this crisis, it's next to impossible to expect any type of learning to occur unless we are attending to our children's emotional and social needs. If you go to the next slide, Nicholas. So let's begin on discussing play. And if any of you have heard any of my other talks, everyone will attest play is my favorite. I mean, I think play bleeds into anything you could possibly do with your child, any domain you want to work on or area of skill that you want to work on. Play is where it all begins. So when it comes to social and emotional, play gives our children a chance to practice different social skills. Through this play, they might acknowledge feelings, share, and they can resolve conflict. They can really learn to resolve conflict through play. Also, as they get older, this will bleed into their older life, and you'll see further improvement in social skills that prepare them to become more socially interactive. So inside the home and out. I loved these pictures, and I kind of just put these in here. The first one I wanted to show you, just kind of give you an example of what I meant by when all these things bleed together. So if you look at picture 1, if you think of that whole child picture again, I see cognitive being in that structure took a lot of problem solving to get those items to balance, right? You have a little visual, spatial, cognitive ability there. Fine motor skills, and and creativity. I mean, let's face it, that's a beautiful picture. And it really shows how all those things are working together. And that's all social and emotional learning right there. Your child being right there with them, praising them, feeling success, anything simple like that, you've made your day. You had 10 minutes with them, knock that out. You can assure yourself that day, your child had some sense of confidence and, that day was a success. I love Friends and Neighbors. I put this game in there, especially for those of you who have young children, perhaps not a lot of language. Now, this game is for 3 and up. I would say that my son probably could do to about 7, but he's moderate to severe on the ASD scale. But it keeps it very simple. It's about $16 on Amazon right now. It's a wonderful game. It takes about 10 minutes from beginning to end. You discuss how people feel, or what this situation would cause you to feel. And it's really just a cute little game, a lot of picture cards. You've had token economy, so you get a token and you can go help somebody with that token. It's a really cute little game. The next one there's that sports, there's that physical element. Go outside, hit some balls with dad or mom. It's a successful day. So again, I just wanted to keep play in the forefront of everyone's mind as we move through the rest of the slides.
And Gina, if I can keep it there, one of the things I want to stress, and this is from me being an athlete, is you'll talk to athletes who are emotionally balanced themselves, but they will all talk about the incredible lessons that sports teach you, from sharing, from not being in the spotlight. And to me as an athlete, probably the greatest thing that sports gave me was resilience. you lose and you're sad, and then you have to get up and do it again.
You're in
Um,
touch with your emotions, aren't you?
yeah, you absolutely have to learn how to take the lumps. And you have days, you have days when your team lost because you made a mistake. And then they support you, and you realize that, even when it's your fault, you have people who support you. You learn that how important that is to support other people. It's just, I cannot underestimate the huge uh, social skills that even the most sophisticated neurotypical child learns. So all of those things are just great for our kids, and you make friends.
Yes. And I will say, I will push that back a step. So let's say you have a young child, 4, you want to prepare them. Maybe you see that sports is an area that they might excel in. I would say, even looking at that first picture, if you take all the philosophies Brian just mentioned, if she was just playing with one other child, if you're that child that's messing things up and knocking things down, or in a classroom setting and you're knocking it down and your peers get on you about that type of behavior, but at the same time, you need the praise from the teacher when you're stacking them well. It's amazing the difference between just you trying to do it at home. My kids really have no interest in building. They really didn't until someone else stepped in and facilitated that play. And then it became social too. So I will say absolutely. And so anything we can do where we're part of a team or part of a group, and we have to create, if you have siblings, tell your kid and your sibling, your child with a disability and the siblings, I want you to create a structure. And even if they're only doing 1 or 2 pieces, but the kids are engaged with each other and praising them, here, put this on, put this on here, showing them where it goes. That's how it all starts, right? And so I just, I love what you said, Brian. I think that's absolutely key, that you got to take your lumps. We learn from our lumps, and that can happen at every age and every stage. So yeah. Next slide, please. We have a lot to cover in a very short time. Okay. So the first area, excuse me, the first, excuse me. Okay, so the first area of that circle that I mentioned to you about what social emotional learning encompasses I want to talk about is self-management. So one of the key, I think for me anyway, my oldest was really severe and had no self-management, couldn't calm themselves, tantrums multiple times on a daily basis. I'm in tears, he's in tears, we just all cry together. Good Italian family. So anyway, this self-management piece is very important to me. And I kind of try to put a hodgepodge of a lot of different things because I wasn't sure who would be listening. And you'll see something as simple as PECs, to teach self-control for maybe a younger or a more severely afflicted child, to even being able to write and choose their own items. So this is all about self-control, self-management. Eric Erikson, who's one of the philosophers that I studied in education, and actually part of my thesis, and love him. In one of his stages of development, from about 3 to 6-year-old in development, it obviously isn't chronological as it is that development stage, that there's this battle between initiative and guilt. What that basically boils down to is kids want to feel in control. They want to be able to initiate. So anything we can do to give them the power to control their own behavior, is key. And it can be something as simple as maybe they can't completely de-escalate a tantrum, but if they can do just one step, if they even just stop themselves from a minute, but then continue to tantrum, you're starting to see gains. And that's kind of actually where I started with JT. If he just paused for a minute, his escalation wouldn't be as severe and probably wouldn't last as long, just by doing that one little thing, by stopping for a moment and just having that quick reflection. He knew he was doing wrong, but he chose to do it anyway. Eventually that incorporated further steps. So maybe they just sit down and put their feet on the floor. If you're looking at that PECs. Maybe they're going to decide they have behaviors they know they need to work on. They're just going to focus on, at school, maybe just staying in their seat, or if they're at home right now, they're going to follow mom's directions in the morning about getting dressed and getting ready, for whatever. It could be anything simple, but having them be in control, having them checking something off that they did or accomplished, is very important. And you can Google and do Google Images, as you guys probably heard me say a million times if you've tuned into my other talks. Google Images is amazing. A lot of free downloads. So if you just put in like self-monitoring checklist for kids, you'll have a million of them. I guarantee you one of them will be more geared towards your child specifically. I put in a little book here called How to Be a Superhero, Self-Control. These are social stories. A lot of you have heard of, social stories, and we're going to get more to that in a few slides down. But it's a cute little story about being a superhero, about controlling yourself. Having a poster in their room, if they read, stop, think, what could happen? The what could happen really connects. If I do this, what's going to happen? If you can get them to start thinking in the future, which is a developmental milestone. Not all kids can do that. They're right here, right now, and this is how I feel, and so I'm going to react to right now. They don't even think there. If you can get them to the point where they actually can start to talk with you about what could happen if this happens, whether it's them doing it or somebody else, if they can identify it, you've made huge gains. And then, of course, is that what I want? And eventually you'll get into options, et cetera. What other things could you do? So, and also you see this little child meditating. I thought that was cute. But again, if you go to Google Images, you can see teaching children how to take deep breaths. There's some cute little pictures there on, just telling them to calm down, take a breath. Good way to practice that is actually when they're happy, believe it or not. So explain, whether it is acting like they're upset and doing a breath, but they're not upset, or if they're really happy and just practicing in and out just so they can get that motion and counting to 10 while they're still happy. That's the time to teach them, not when they're upset. I learned that the hard way. Next slide, please. Or anyone want to say anything on self-management? Brian, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. Brian dropped off.
Okay, that's okay.
I wanted to put something in about the self-management piece and self-regulation, and you might get to it later, I don't know, but for us, a big thing was sensory and understanding the sensory triggers and getting my son to the point where he could recognize them and have awareness of them and take steps to shield himself or advocate for himself when he needed to.
Absolutely.
That helped him a lot.
Yes, and that is that self-monitoring checklist, right? So if he knows his trigger, if you've identified a trigger, that is the perfect thing to put there. Or more likely, you'd want to put the antecedent before it happens, right? So so anytime you can identify that, then think of what the solution would be, and it's probably the solution you'd want to list.
And then we also just got a comment saying that the audio's not great. I can hear. I don't know. Gina, if you can move closer to the microphone. I don't know if anyone else is having issues with the audio. Please let me know.
Okay, I'm pulling up my mic right now to see if there's anything. Can you guys hear me okay now? Is this better at all?
I can hear you well, Emily.
I can hear you well too, yeah.
Okay. Nothing more annoying than being on a webinar and the audio.
All right.
Yeah.
And we had one more person say that they can hear us well. So.
Okay. Well, I apologize to the one that can't. Okay. Then yes. So when it comes to a sensory diet is huge. I am not covering sensory diet today outside of that. The next slide, when we get into self-awareness, we will talk a little bit about our feelings. And when we come in touch with our feelings, then we can find those solutions. A sensory diet, I did it myself. I didn't necessarily use a specialist, but I do recommend if they're so impacted sensorily where they need a BCBA or they need someone that specializes in that, I would recommend seeking that, because I know how much that can impact people. Once I did hyperbarics, I probably should say that, but my son's sensory system started to really become less impacted. Okay. Sensory diets, they're so specific to a child. I mean, brushing protocols, all those things. I've done a million different ones, and I've never heard of one that's general to the masses. I mean, there's certain things you can do, weighted blankets, that kind of thing. But there's nothing really novel I feel like I could really add to that common knowledge.
Sure. And I wasn't specifically speaking about anything quite that sophisticated. I was more talking about understanding lights or noises or smells, and him not understanding that other people weren't affected the way he was affected. And he would tell people something and they would say, oh, that's no big deal. But to him, it was a big deal and it would escalate the situation. Whereas if he could identify the specific thing in the atmosphere that was bothering him
Right.
and take steps to alleviate that, then everybody could go on with their day and it wouldn't turn into a problem.
And one thing I think, you know, about that social emotional piece is, I think the hard part for a lot of our kids is when they do start that self-awareness piece. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Emily, because, you know, it's like, okay, this affects me, but not them. And because we are very egocentric in our early stages of development, and we have to apply things to us before we can apply it to others, it's like, it's all about me. So why am I different? I think it might also, I would just probably say with social stories or however, or even a dialogue with a friend, what bothers them. Because I guarantee, you know, you might want to point out what bothers them that also is okay with your child, so that they realize, oh, we all have things, right? They start to see that I'm not the only one who's affected by, I might be affected by the noise and the lights, but guess what? Dogs terrify that person. And that's okay. That acceptance of those differences, but knowing that you're not alone with these having annoyances. That's what we call them here. Our annoyances.
And then we just got a comment saying that we used to have a 28-year-old nephew who we are trying to get to tell us what bothers him.
Yeah, and it you know, start that dialogue if you can. It is hard, and I think sometimes, you know, some of us, sometimes we're just, even me, I know sometimes I'm in a mood, I don't know why. You know, but this, if you can identify, sometimes it will take a person, maybe who's not afflicted with a disability, to actually chart and try to find an antecedent, which means what caused a behavior. So when you saw a behavior, what happened right before the behavior, or what happened, maybe it's not a behavior, but the behavior could just be they're annoyed. It doesn't have to be an overt behavior. So if that 28-year-old is astute enough to know, that could actually write down what happened right before they felt annoyed, then go for it. If not, maybe an adult needs to have maybe the little dialogue and start to chart it. It may take a while to find a pattern.
And the 28-year-old is nonverbal.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So do they use a communication device at all or anything like that?
I'll let you know if we get a response.
If there is any form of mode of, it would still be the same thing. It would just be a different mode of communication to try to get to the bottom of it. Kids, when they were nonverbal, they were much younger, but I would always track what happened right before. Theirs were overt behaviors, you know, tantrums, that kind of thing. But it's still the same thing.
They're just learning to use one.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, that's great. Glad to hear it. I'm sure he's going to be a lot less frustrated. That may alone solve his irritability. So that's fantastic. Well, good to you on that.
And he didn't have much assistance when he was younger, so good on you. That's getting that.
And if that's why you're here, that makes me want to cry. I love it. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, next slide, please, Nicholas. Self-awareness. So,
oh wait, next slide. I'm on self-awareness. Okay.
Yeah. Were you just on self-management before that, right?
I'd been on self-awareness for a little bit.
Okay. Let me make sure. I'm going to make sure I can see. I'm looking at my slides. I'm going to go to you, so make sure that it's going to make sense.
Okay.
So now we are both on self-awareness. I'm reading my notes. Yours doesn't have my notes. Okay. So in the self-awareness piece, and this actually great time. So your nephew, I believe it was. So here is something, labeling emotions. Labeling our emotions is the beginning of self-awareness. Self-awareness of knowing how we feel, or it's big part of self-awareness. It can be as simple as pointing to icons, right? So like that first feelings chart I have there. You can do it while they're doing an activity, after an activity, or maybe just to summarize the day. There's no right or wrong or how to implement this. Whatever information you want to know about your child's feelings at that moment, give it to them. You can add feelings again, Google Images. You can add whatever you want to work on. If they're only working on 2 different emotions, but you want to increase the emotions as much as you can. For children that can read, you want to get a little more introspective, like I feel blank when you blank. And these are fill-ins. They're pretty simple. And you see the little heart, so that's supposed to be a positive thing. But then there's a little negative there with the star. It bugs me when and then you kind of just fill in, I wish you would. And what I love about that one is, the reason I put this one on here is there's a solution. Like I'm going to give you what would really help me. So I wish you would blank. Love that one. So there's that level. Again, you can search these. There's a million of them on this. I pulled these from Google Images. Feelings. I want you to pretend this. Recently, I've been working on developmental milestones, and what's very interesting to me is 4 years old, they should know 6 different emotions, and I thought that was interesting. And because that's a typical development quote, and I have air quotes, you can't see that, but so that's a typical development. My kids, probably didn't reach that. JT probably to about 12 or 13, where he could identify those. So with that said, I want you to picture if you only had maybe sad, mad, and happy in your vocabulary that you identify with. Those are the only 3 words you have to describe every part of your day. Happy, mad, sad. That's it. When we have language, we internalize our language, we feel those things. So the more we can expand their vocabulary in the self-awareness piece and these emotions, we are equipping them with coming more in tune to what they're feeling. Doesn't any of that make sense? Yes, maybe. So, and even it's just all the different emojis, your kid just was playing a video game and scored a goal, and you go, how do you feel? And you're like, cool, awesome. Anything you can do because they're nonverbal, right? Or you actually start off by actually showing them that was awesome, and then showing them the emoji that you feel that they're doing, right? So anything we can do to really expand that language there. Self-awareness. I love the circle graph. It's about being in tune with our needs, our hopes and dreams, values, personal interests, and our skills. And the skills area really is referring to knowing our strengths and knowing our weaknesses. And that happens much later in development. The next, the all about me. Those are things, that's another thing you can Google. All about me. I'm sure every beginning of a school year, you've seen these things come home and your kids put in their birthday, what they like, their favorite food. Those are great ways to start them really understanding and becoming self-aware. Now, don't get me wrong. My kid has a different favorite food every week, or every day even, has a favorite movie. That's pretty typical for a younger development. There's no real favorite song that, like, I've had the same favorite song for like 6 years. That really doesn't happen at that age of development. So just, it's cute. But they do understand what they like, what they enjoy. And there are some that are much more introspective. So depending on the development of your child, you can Google all about me activities, and then click the images section on Google. And I'm sure you'll find something that you could work on with your kid tomorrow at their level. Moving on to the responsible decision-making part of our wheel. So this area is often, when you hear at school, we're going to read a social story. Social stories, I told you, will be coming up again. Social stories, I love social stories, right? I've even written my own. I know families that have written their own social stories and have their own kids' pictures inserted into it when you're really trying to teach them something. Because again, we're egocentric in the lower levels of development. We all are. So having a social story is great, whether it is about themselves, like the ones I just described, or it's about others, like little books off to the left. What should Danny do? What if everybody did that? They have them at all different levels of comprehension levels. And it can open up a dialogue. I highly recommend even Winnie the Pooh, even if, what is it? The frogs, I forget, sorry. I recently had a brain injury. So it's one of my favorite book stories anyway. There's all these little messages in any story you really read to your child, even fairy tales. There's some underlying messages. What I love about social stories is it gives you those opportunities to really talk about pragmatic, what happens. They're very today orientated, and again, at all different levels, and it opens a discussion. I'm sorry, I saw a message come up. Was that to me? Does someone have a question, Nicholas?
There was one question on how would you figure out what food they like? This is the same person with the 28-year-old nephew.
Okay, great. Yeah. I use PECs a lot for my nonverbal kids. And if you know them well enough, you know what they eat. And a lot of times a child or even a 28-year-old, an adult who doesn't have language, you're going to see them eating the same thing over and over. So look at their outward behavior and then pick like 4 or 5 items, print a Google image and put them out. And if they don't understand the word favorite, you can, I love ice cream, I like, if they can understand that, what do you like the most or favorite, however they can understand, like pick one and see what they choose. And then when they choose it, hey, go ahead and put some glue on it and stick that as your answer on your all about me sheet. Just make it fun. And I guarantee you at those moments, not only do I feel, especially if you're 28 years old and you're really trying to connect with them on that level, even if they're not learning anything more about themselves because they know they love pizza, knowing that they can express to you pizza is their favorite food, talk about just heartfelt. That would be a great moment. So yeah, just use pictures. That's what I would do. Hopefully that helped. Okay, you're welcome. So responsible decision making, it is through discussion, and it can be very, very simple to looking at just one. So like, what did Danny do is a story about, obviously there's a problem and then we're going to come to a solution. Remember our teachers when you were in school, they used to ask you, what do you think will happen next? Just kind of along those lines. And then take it one step further. Okay, that'll happen. What do you think the results will be? Or, well, then what'll happen? Or whatever language you have to use for your child's level, and see how far you can go with it. So starting with social stories is great. Great way to get that communication. Also, way off to the left, that problem-solving process, what I would do is I would take a story like, what should Danny do? And I would start identifying in another story what the problem was and fill in the answers. What was the solution Danny did? What was the consequence? What's a different choice they could have made? That kind of thing. And I would start filling in my chart. And I would do most of the talking, even for kids who have some language, and just go, and teaching them how to use that if they're ready for that. Also about themselves. If a child comes to you with a problem, it can be, and again, this doesn't have to be very, very high level. Let's say your kids are sitting there pulling on each other. They're pulling one iPad and one's on the left side, one's on the right side, and they both want the iPad. You could have a problem solving, solution, a wheel, or, what could we do? And, this is what's going to happen. And so it doesn't have to be really, really serious to use any of these strategies. It could be something as simple as they're arguing. What could we do? We could talk it out. We could apologize for yanking it away from our brother. We can go wait and cool off, and mom can just take it away, but no, that's a possible consequence, right? You're fighting. No one gets the iPad. Take turns, whatever solutions you want to give them an option for. Obviously give them the language first, then maybe put a visual on a wheel, if those are things that occur often, so they can see that they have choices that they can make. Again, still trying to insert some of the responsibility onto them, because until they have control over making some of these decisions, it's going to be you, the caregiver, running around. I don't want, because I do it too, inserting what is right or wrong onto them instead of them making the right choice. And I hate to say it, but this isn't just a battle that us parents with children or caregivers of children with special needs deal with. Regular, kids with parents with neurotypical kids, they deal with this stuff too. So yes.
I was just going to say that's a great visual, that problem solving wheel.
Thank
I
you.
love it because, a lot of times, um, kids I know, if they get a little escalated, they might know things to do, but they might not have access to those things in the moment when they're upset. And having this as a visual nearby where they can look at it or refer to it or have you direct them to it,
Yes.
that's just awesome. That's a great visual.
Yeah, I love them. And again, it may not have this many pieces. Also, if you're on the lower level, might start off with three strategies. Remember, you got to teach each of these strategies, right? So it's not just putting something on a wheel and thinking they'll understand what to do when they see it. So a lot of times, if they know how to tell someone stop, then that can go on the wheel if that's an option, that kind of thing. So yeah, this is this can be high or low. Responsible decision making is all about thinking. It's really about it's thinking before you act. And I don't know if you guys have seen the thread yet, but just like that person with the little girl in the beginning with the cognitive, the physical, the social, the emotional, all working together, all of these pieces of social emotional learning all work together. To make a responsible decision, we have to be in control. We have to have self-management. And to have self-management, we have to have self-awareness. So again, all of these things work together. But the good news is if we work on one piece, we know we're affecting the whole person. Again, it's that whole person approach. And this just happens to be in that social emotional area. Okay, next.
And then Gina, we had
Yes.
one additional question. If we will be sharing the slides after the session. We do not normally share the slides after the session, but we do record these videos and upload them to YouTube. So you'll be able to watch this webinar whenever and skip around and be able to see these slides whenever you'd like.
Yeah, it's a great way to go back to the resources. And we do have previous talks too, and those topics are also on YouTube that Nick mentioned as well. That play-based therapy and all that stuff. We've had those discussions, had several different webinars, I think, that have been really, really fun. Just a lot of things I wish I knew way back when. Okay. So responsible decision making. And then this brings us to those last two pieces, that social awareness and relationship skills. Again, all of these things working together. So social awareness, as I mentioned earlier, is defined as the ability to show understanding and empathy to others. And again, this is that piece is very, very difficult to teach directly. And I'm not saying that you're either born with empathy or you're not. No, it can be learned, but it comes definitely much more naturally to some than to others. And I love that little picture of that little child covering that kitty cat in the middle there. That is a compassionate little one that, definitely on the more side of the scale. I love that picture. It really has no bearing to this talk, I don't think, but I just thought it was cute, made me chuckle. But
Gina, which
yes.
slide are you on?
I am on social awareness, relationship skill building.
Okay, we're still on responsible decision making. I didn't get a go to next slide.
Go next slide, please. Sorry.
Okay, there's the cute little kid covering the kitty cat.
Yes. So, and this goes to that that empathy piece I mentioned. You can teach it. It does take a lot, and as I mentioned earlier, you have to apply things to yourself first, usually, and feel something before you can really have that emotion for someone else. For the most part, some people are just astute and in tune with those emotions of others, whether or not they've personally experienced them or not. But for the most part, we're just through that egocentric stage of development. When we feel it, then after that part, we can actually apply it to that more social awareness piece. I think, and also it depends on the person. So for example, we have little kiddos that'll help their mommies. They'll want to protect their mommies. Maybe those little kids, those real precocious ones that'll say, don't talk to my mommy like that. Or if someone gets a little nasty with you at their store or something. And so that is compassion for a loved one. And that is kind of those early steps of where it starts, that relationship building. Now with the disability, I have 4 children. I have 2 with an ASD and 2 without, 2 neurotypical kids. And I can honestly tell you, my more mild he's probably my most compassionate child. But he had a lot of compassion building. So he was definitely in his own world and very into himself. But it can be done, and it starts off with just a lot of praise for any little help they give you. And again, I'll go back to that earlier, that first slide when I mentioned the game, um, Friends and Neighbors, great game. That things, and it doesn't have to be that game, but things that work on what would you do if this happened, all that, even those social stories, all of that works on that compassion and that empathy piece. Letting them know how you feel, because again, as I mentioned, they're most closest to their caregivers, and discussing your emotions, not, in a situation. So make it situational. When something happens, how did that make you feel? Sharing those, so it's not always a one-sided, they come to you. But I'm not saying talk to them like your friend, but to use the teaching opportunity when you were hurt by something, even if they hurt you, and trying to explain it, if of course, if they're developmentally able to understand, is to feel it's okay to tell them they hurt you. It's okay to cry in front of them. It's okay. So it helps build compassion, in my opinion. Reward and praise to encourage that desire to help others. That's why you'll see a lot of schools will have token systems or dollars, or earn points and get a free root beer float party for being a super duper helper. All those things. There's a reason for it. It does build because they know that young kids, I get to go, I'll do whatever I need to do, and eventually it just becomes part of their nature. At least it's what we're hoping for. So, and then relationship skills, being in control, that self-control piece, self-management, being self-aware, knowing your emotions, knowing what your capabilities are, what you can do, what strengths you can bring to any, and kids do this. And again, it doesn't have to be this, as in the adult world. I'm talking about in the kid world. So the kid who knows that they know how to stack the blocks the best, they absolutely know. And they'll be like, you know what? I'll take the top, you take the base. That they know that person may not be as astute as them in stacking those blocks. It can be very simple like that. You'll see these kids just all of a sudden, when they're working together, they play to their strengths. And that's a great thing, because it means they've been praised. They're aware of some of their skills. That is, all of these parts work together to get to that relationship building. And the reason relationship skills is so important to me is, I don't know about any of you, but I know my own personal journey with my boys is having a friend, like in this, using the same definition of a friend that I had when I was their age, doesn't exist in their world. So for me, in my perspective is, oh my goodness, they don't have a best friend. They don't have friends coming over. They're not going to sleepovers. They're not doing, oh my goodness, my poor children. No, they're happy. They're happy. They're very happy kiddos. But I would like eventually for them to get to that stage. I would like for the JT to be able to not do karate one-on-one, but to join the team or the group lessons. And so that's what we're working on, and being able to work together. So the relationship skills is that last piece, but you can be doing it all the time, working together. Let them help you with chores. We had a discussion about that. There's another webinar on that about, what they can do around the home to help. Having them help at home, again, empowering them to be self-sufficient. Even if you just say, today, I'm going to teach them how to zip their own pants, or we're going to work on that this week. We're going to zip our own pants and we're going to potty ourselves independently. That would be a great start. Look at that center picture. So, being able to problem solve a situation, use any teaching opportunity to go back to whether the decision-making, responsible decision-making, if you go back, look back at that slide, you would see that right now we have a teaching moment, build a relationship skill by looking at what responsible decision we can make. And there are, Super Duper is a great program. They're a little pricey, but I'm sure you can find anything if you Google, maybe on Amazon. You want social situation cards is what they would be called, like social situation talking points or social situation cards, and it'll come up. And these are pictures like this. And then all you do is, oh my goodness, what happened? What do you think? And there's no real wrong answer, right? You can think the little one is taking it from the big one, or you can think the big one's taking it from the little one and she's crying. There's really no wrong answer. And you can actually discuss it. What could they do? What would you do if you were that big girl? What would you do? You know, and just see where you go from there. So anyway, so here you have working together in that first picture. Little collaboration. Collaboration is key skill to have if they're ever going to have a job. Problem solving, and then the last one, I love this, sharing. Look at that cute little face reaching over to give a crayon. Anytime you can have them bring something to a sibling, share something with the sibling, all of that is working on that social emotional or cell principle that we talk about. Now, just to close, I know we're a little bit over, but just to close, I just wanted to say, I hope through the talk, you guys, if anything, all I want to do is give you parents out there or caregivers some reassurance that there is, it's the little things. And a lot of right now with this pandemic and being at home, it's a lot. We know, and because as adults, we are very self-aware and socially aware. We know what's going on in the communities. Some of us, the nation and whatnot. And I have to stay away from all that. It kind of scares me right now. But we are very socially aware. So we take on a lot. And then we look at our kiddos, they're not in school, maybe we've lost our jobs, or maybe we had to resign from our positions because now our kids are home and there's a pandemic and our kids' safety is more important than, hiring a babysitter, that kind of thing. So I don't know. It could be a million different things, but it's harsh out there. Just know, engage with your child. Just think about it as like 10 minutes every hour, or, in their waking hours, incorporate one or two little things like this. Do a, all about me poster this week. Just fill in 2 sections a day. You're doing enough, I guess is my point. I'm being long-winded at saying you're doing enough. The fact that you're listening to this webinar speaks volumes. So just relax. What is this? How do you help when I'm
going to say, think especially when doing an activity. So the rest of it's, my nephew loves to help, but has a hard time receiving help and gets very frustrated. He does not like to have people think he's not capable. This happens especially when in a group. How do you help when doing an activity?
So I would think, okay, so and my philosophy about group work is a lot of times when you're going to be socializing and working in groups, whether even if it's just a simple game or an activity, it should be something they know how to do well. You start off wanting to teach the skill of an activity or teach a game one-on-one. It's less frustrating for them. And you can also wait them out. Like you want to always play a game or do an activity that's of high interest. And again, speak to a specialist that can work with them directly a lot, but my inkling would just be to follow their lead in the beginning, work one-on-one, and then when you've acquired a skill, and it could be as simple as playing catch, then you want to bring in maybe one friend first, play catch with them, but make sure they're very confident before they start doing it in a group setting, because then you have a lot of other emotions going on in there, which could be why they're upset. And also, let's not forget the sensory system. So, but definitely if they have confidence and they have something mastered, like they love to color or they love to draw or paint or whatever, and they've mastered that, they do that on their own all the time, then by all means, bring it into a group. But I recommend starting with just one-on-one first. Do we have any other questions about tonight's talk? I hope it's been helpful. I just wanted to end where we began. Again, just as a reminder that our child has all of these areas that are constantly working together, play to their strengths. It kind of goes against our mother instinct or parental instinct, I should say. Sorry, guys. Because what happens is if, let's say, I mentioned the student I worked with that's now a pro wrestler, physical was his only real strength. it doesn't mean we did not work on emotional, cognitive, and social, but his biggest deficit, I would have to say, was cognitive. The human nature in a mother or father would be, we need to work on their weakest link. And sometimes we would forget their strength because, hey, good, they're doing good there. Let's focus on the weakness. That is human nature. I'm guilty of it. I think we're all as parents guilty of it to some extent or another. I'm asking you to actually flip it. Find a balance. Find a way. And I'm not saying don't work on, no, by no means am I not saying don't work on their weaknesses. Absolutely do. But work on those strengths, play to their strengths. Let their strengths will eventually bleed into their weak areas. I promise you. So don't forget their strengths. Treat the whole child. Do what they enjoy. Play and have fun. And that's all I got.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Gina. Questions are in the chat or in the Q&A are open.
I miss your dad for the end of the talk. He usually has little notes to put in there.
Yeah, I don't know. He dropped off a little while ago, and
Brian.
I don't know if he had issues with
Yeah.
his computer. I haven't heard back. So
Emily, thank you very much for having me again tonight.
Oh, thank you. This is really helpful.
Did you have anything to add or?
No, we're taking next week off because of the 4th of July. But the week after that, we will be, we have someone talking about safety in the moment. I mean, we're like the talk tonight, we're really stressing prevention, but if there is an outburst, how do you keep everybody safe? That's the topic. And that will be the second Thursday in July. I don't have might be the 11th. I don't have the date right off the top of my head, but that will be announced on our Facebook page. And thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you very much. Oh, I see. Do we have another question or was that?
nope, we have a couple thank yous, and thank you very much, Emily.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.